The wind off Lake Baikal doesn't just blow, it carves. It carves the shoreline, it carves the ice, and it has carved deep, jagged lines into the face of old Marek. He stands on the frozen expanse, a solitary shadow against a world of blinding white, clutching a hand-carved wooden rod that looks like a piece of driftwood. The younger men in the village call him the ghost of the frozen shore, a name meant more as an insult than a legend. They laugh when they see his empty sled, mocking the way he stares at the ice as if he could see through 2 meters of solid crystal. But Marek doesn't blink. He knows something they don't, a secret buried in the black depths of the world's deepest lake. Before we see what lies beneath, join our community at Beyond the Fields to honor those who stand their ground. Today, the laughter ends. The frost on the inside of the cabin window is thick enough to write a man's name in. Marek wakes every morning when the moon is still high, the air in the small room smelling of cedar smoke and the faint, sharp scent of dried fish. For 5 generations, his family has lived on this patch of rocky earth, a place where the soil is too thin for wheat, and the only harvest comes from the water. His grandfather told him that Baikal is not a lake, but a living god with a temper like a winter gale. You don't take from it, you ask it for permission. But the modern world doesn't ask for permission. The taxes on the shoreline property have tripled in the last 3 years, and the local authorities talk of rezoning the old docks for luxury lodges. Marek's daughter, Elena, tries to hide the worry in her eyes as she stirs a thin pot of porridge. Her hands are chapped and red from working at the cannery in town, a job that barely covers the electricity. They are clinging to this land by their fingernails. The roof of the shed needs repair, and the woodpile is shrinking faster than the season allows. Every night, the silence in the house is heavy with the things they don't say. They are the last of their kind here, a family of small-scale netters in an era of industrial trawlers and sonar-guided fleets. The land demands a resilience that breaks most men, and Marek can feel the cold seeping into his joints, a reminder that his time is as thin as the ice in early October. He remembers the days when the fish were so thick they seemed to turn the water into a shimmering river of silver. Now the bay is quiet. Some say the fish moved to the deeper trenches, fleeing the noise of the big engines. Others say they are simply gone, fished out by the giants who don't know when to stop. But Marek remains. He spends his days repairing nets that have been mended so many times they are more knots than twine. He sharpens his ice auger by hand, the rhythmic scrape of the stone against metal the only music in the yard. To leave this place would be to let his ancestors die a second death. The ice isn't just frozen water to him. It is a ledger of every winter his father survived, every storm his grandfather weathered. It is a legacy written in frost. When he walks out onto the lake, he isn't just looking for a meal. He's looking for a reason to keep the fire burning. The world tells him he is a relic, a stubborn old man fighting a tide that has already turned. But Marek knows the lake has a memory. He knows that the deep water holds on to things that the surface forgets. He watches the cracks in the ice, listening to the deep, booming groans of the lake shifting in its sleep. It is a dangerous language, one that requires a lifetime to learn. One wrong step, one moment of arrogance, and the lake claims you. His family has paid that price before, with a brother lost to a sudden crack 40 years ago. Yet, he returns every morning. He isn't seeking wealth, he's seeking survival. The hardship is a constant companion, like the wind that never truly stops. He sees the way the village looks at him, the pity in the eyes of the shopkeeper, the way the school children whisper. They see a man defeated by time. They don't see the way his eyes catch the light of the rising sun, a spark of something ancient and unyielding. The shoreline is changing, the old wooden boats rotting in the tall grass, while the new steel hulls glisten in the harbor. But Marek's feet are planted in the traditions of the soil and the soul. He believes that the land and the water provide for those who respect the silence. He waits for the lake to speak. The peace of the morning is shattered by the roar of an engine that sounds like a chainsaw tearing through silk. A sleek, black snowmobile skids to a halt near Marek's fishing hole, kicking up a spray of ice crystals that sting his face. Two men climb off, dressed in gear that costs more than Marek's house. Their jackets are bright, Gore-Tex orange, and their boots look like they were designed for a mission to the moon. These are the representatives of the Vostok Commercial Group, the suits with shrewd smiles who have been buying up the rights to the northern bays. They don't see a man when they look at Marek. They see an obstacle, a stubborn piece of grit in a well-oiled machine. The taller one, a man named Victor, with a mouth that seems permanently curled in a smirk, pulls out a tablet and taps the screen. He shows Marek a digital map of the lake, glowing with heat signatures and sonar readings. He laughs, a sharp barking sound that carries over the ice. He tells Marek that his primitive handlines are a joke, a waste of a perfectly good afternoon. He points to the horizon, where the company's massive industrial rigs are positioned, their lights flickering like predatory stars. Victor explains that they have found the schools of fish using satellite data and underwater drones. They don't wait for the fish to come to them. They hunt them down with the cold precision of a computer. He offers Marek a contract, a buyout for his small dock and his family's water rights. The price is insulting, a fraction of what the land is worth. But Victor frames it as a charity. He tells Marek that he's an old man who should be sitting by a heater, not freezing his bones for a catch that doesn't exist. The suits mock his wooden rod, calling it a museum piece. They joke about the smell of his old sheepskin coat, their laughter echoing off the frozen cliffs. They want the shoreline for a private marina, a place for the wealthy to park their yachts during the short summers. They represent a world where everything has a price and nothing has a value. Marek doesn't say a word. He listens to their pitch, his hands tucked into his sleeves, his face as unreadable as the ice. He sees the greed in their eyes, the way they look at the lake as nothing more than a resource to be drained and discarded. They have no connection to the water, no understanding of the delicate balance that keeps the ecosystem alive. To them, the fish are just numbers on a spreadsheet, and Marek is a rounding error. They think they have conquered the Baikal because they have the loudest engines and the most expensive gear. They don't realize that the lake doesn't care about their money or their technology. Marek watches as they ride off, their laughter trailing behind them like exhaust fumes. He knows they are planning to move their biggest fleet into this bay by the end of the week. They believe they can force him out by sheer intimidation, by showing him how small he is compared to their corporate might. But Marek understands something they will never grasp. The lake is a master of patience. The suits think they are in control because the sonar is pinging, but they are looking at the surface of a deep, dark mystery. They see the fish that are easy to catch, the ones that follow the artificial lights, and the chum. They don't know about the ones that live in the shadows, the ones that have survived for decades by avoiding the noise. Marek returns to his work, his movements slow and deliberate. He isn't intimidated by their smiles or their threats. He has seen empires rise and fall while the lake remained. He has seen men who thought they were gods swallowed by a sudden storm. He feels a quiet fire burning in his chest, a resolve that has nothing to do with pride and everything to do with honor. Let them laugh, he thinks. The lake hasn't given its answer yet. Saturday is market day in the village, a time when the air usually smells of baking bread and the chatter of neighbors. But for Marek, it has become a gauntlet of shame. He arrives with his small wooden sled, carrying only a handful of scrawny perch and a few grayling that wouldn't fill a child's plate. Nearby, the Vostok group has set up a massive refrigerated stall, overflowing with prime omul and sturgeon, caught by their industrial trawlers. The villagers cluster around the corporate stand, lured by the bright lights and the low prices meant to drive the local fishermen out of business. When Marek sets out his modest catch, the laughter starts. It begins with the younger men, the ones who have taken jobs on the corporate boats. They mock his empty nets and his refusal to join the modern age. They call him a fool for starving on principle. One of them, a man Marek once taught how to tie a clinch knot, tosses a coin at Marek's feet and tells him to buy a real meal before he wastes away. The humiliation is thick, a heavy fog that threatens to choke him. Even his neighbors, people who have known him for 40 years, look away with a mixture of pity and frustration. They want him to sell his land so the corporate money will flow faster into the town. They see his struggle as a burden on the community's progress. Marek stands behind his small wooden table, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the horizon of the lake visible at the end of the street. He refuses to lower his price, and he refuses to beg. When the corporate manager walks by and offers to buy his entire catch just to throw it to the village dogs, Marek simply shakes his head. The hunger in his stomach is sharp, a physical pain that gnaws at his ribs, but the hunger for dignity is stronger. He returns home that evening with his sled almost as heavy as when he left, the unsold fish cold and stiff. Elena is waiting for him, and though she says nothing, he can see the toll the poverty is taking. The electricity has been cut off, and they are living by candlelight. The corporate representatives visit again the next morning, their smiles even wider, their offers even lower. They know he is desperate. They think they have broken his spirit by making him a laughingstock. They don't understand that a man who has nothing to lose is the most dangerous man of all. Marek spends the night in prayer and contemplation, not to a god in a book, but to the spirit of the water. He realizes that the corporate fleet is failing to catch the true wealth of the lake because they are too loud, too fast, and too arrogant. They are stripping the shallows, but they are blind to the movements of the deep. He decides it is time to use the knowledge his father whispered to him on his deathbed, a secret about the thermal vents and the way the current pulls during the turn of the moon. It is a gamble that could cost him his life, but staying here and rotting in the face of their laughter is a fate worse than drowning. He begins to prepare his gear, not the heavy nets of the corporations, but a single ancient trap made of willow and horsehair, weighted with stones from the shore. He moves with a renewed purpose, his hands steady despite the cold. The village thinks he is a joke, a ghost of a bygone era. They think the story of the independent fisherman is over. But the lake is deep, and its secrets are long held. Marek will go out one last time, not for the market, and not for the suits, but to prove that the soul of the land cannot be bought or sold for a handful of silver. The night before the great catch, the temperature drops so low that the air seems to shatter with every breath. Marek is out on the ice long after the corporate crews have retreated to their heated cabins and their vodka. The silence of the lake at midnight is absolute, a heavy weight that presses against the ears. This is the long, silent watch. Marek isn't using sonar or GPS. He is using his feet, feeling the vibrations of the ice, listening for the singing of the frozen deep. He finds a spot 5 miles out, far beyond where the industrial boats dare to go in the winter dark. Here, the ice is treacherous, honeycombed with internal pressures that can swallow a man in seconds. He begins to cut a series of holes, not in a straight line, but in a specific geometric pattern that follows the hidden thermal currents his ancestors mapped over centuries. The water here is thousands of feet deep, a black abyss that holds the oldest life in the world. He sets his traps, using a bait he spent days preparing, a mixture of fermented roe and mountain herbs that mimics the scent of the deep-water shrimp. It is a slow, agonizing process. His fingers go numb, then white, then a deep, aching purple. He has to keep moving to stay alive, pacing a small circle in the snow. He watches the stars, the only witnesses to his labor. He thinks about the suits and their smiles, their certainty that they had won because they had the bigger ledger. He thinks about the villagers who laughed, their voices now silent in their beds. He feels a strange peace, a connection to the earth that transcends the cold. He is no longer an old man. He is a part of the cycle, a guardian of the secret. The hours crawl by. The wind picks up, howling like a wounded animal, trying to drive him off the ice. He huddles in his furs, his breath frosting his beard, until he looks like a creature of the elements. He isn't just waiting for fish. He's waiting for a sign. Around 3 a.m, the ice beneath him shudders. It isn't the groan of a crack, but a rhythmic thumping, a heartbeat from the depths. The current has shifted. The deep-water giants, the ones that have avoided the metal nets and the sonar pings for decades, are moving. They follow the warmth of the vents, drawn by the scent Marek has laid out. These are the ancient ones, the fish that the corporations don't even believe exist anymore. Marek begins to pull the lines. The weight is immense, a heavy, dead pull that threatens to snap his wooden rod. He doesn't use a winch. He uses his shoulders, his legs, the very core of his being. Every inch of line is a battle. His muscles scream, and his heart hammers against his ribs like a trapped bird. He is pulling against the strength of the lake itself. The first trap breaks the surface, and for a moment, the world goes still. Inside the willow cage is a fish so large it looks like a creature from a dream, its scales shimmering with an iridescent, prehistoric light. It is a giant sturgeon, a species thought to be extinct in this part of the lake, its body nearly 6 feet long. But it's not just one. The other traps are full, heavy with a bounty that defies logic. This is the catch of a century, a miracle pulled from the jaws of a frozen hell. Marek doesn't cheer. He doesn't shout. He simply continues to work, his movements a prayer of gratitude. He knows that this catch will change everything. It will pay the taxes, repair the house, and secure Elena's future. But more than that, it is a testament to the old ways, a victory for the underdog who refused to be silenced. As the first light of dawn touches the horizon, Marek is surrounded by a harvest of silver and gold, a fortune in fish that the corporations could never find. He begins the long trek back to the shore, his sled so heavy he has to stop every 50 yards to catch his breath. The ice seems to support him now, the wind at his back. He is no longer the ghost of the frozen shore. He is the man who spoke to the lake and received an answer. The sun rises over the village like a hammer on an anvil, cold and bright. When Marek reaches the docks, the first of the corporate crews are just waking up, stepping out of their trailers with coffee in their hands. They see the old man approaching, his sled leaving a deep, heavy furrow in the snow. At first, they begin to laugh, the familiar sneer of the powerful toward the weak. But as he gets closer, the laughter dies in their throats. One by one, they set down their cups and walk toward the shoreline, their eyes widening in disbelief. The word spreads through the village like a wildfire. People run from their houses, some still in their nightcoats, as Marek pulls his sled into the center of the market square. He stops in the very spot where he was mocked just days before. He doesn't say a word. He simply reaches down and pulls back the canvas cover. The gasp that goes through the crowd is collective, a sharp intake of breath that sounds like the wind. There, laid out in the freezing air, are the giants of the deep. The sturgeon are so magnificent they look like they were carved from the lake's own heart. Their scales catch the morning light, throwing off sparks of emerald and silver. The ommel he has caught are twice the size of anything seen in 20 years, their bodies fat and healthy, a sign that the deep water still thrives. The corporate manager, Victor, pushes through the crowd, his face pale, his tablet forgotten. He looks at the catch, then at Marek, then back at the catch. His sonar had told him the bay was empty. His satellites had shown nothing. He demands to know where Marek found them, his voice cracking with a mixture of greed and desperation. He tries to offer Marek a massive sum on the spot, 10 times the buyout he had offered for the land. But Marek simply looks him in the eye and says nothing. The silence is the loudest thing in the square. The villagers who had laughed are now silent, their heads bowed in a sudden, sharp realization of their own foolishness. They see the man they called a ghost standing as a titan among them. The local shopkeeper, the one who had pitied him, steps forward and offers him the best of his stock for free. But Marek shakes his head. He begins to distribute the fish, not to the corporations, but to the families who have struggled the most, the ones the suits were trying to starve out. He keeps only what he needs for his family, and enough to pay his debts. The corporate fleet is humiliated. Their technology has been proven useless against the wisdom of the earth. By noon, the story has reached the regional authorities. The presence of the giant sturgeon proves that the bay is a vital ecological sanctuary, a fact that Marek's catch has brought to light. The plans for the luxury marina and the industrial expansion are halted by an immediate environmental injunction. The suits have lost their leverage. Their investment is dead in the water, their expensive gear now just a collection of useless metal. Marek has not only saved his own legacy, he has saved the lake for everyone. He walks back to his cabin, his pockets finally full enough to keep the lights on and the roof tight. He sees Elena waiting for him at the gate, her face wet with tears of relief. The weight on his shoulders is gone, replaced by a quiet, steady pride. He has proven that the land and the water belong to those who labor with love and respect, not to those who seek only to extract. The laughter of the arrogant has been silenced by the bounty of the humble. As the sun dips below the mountains, casting long purple shadows across the ice. Marek sits by his hearth. The fire is roaring now, fueled by seasoned birch that throws a warm, golden glow against the old wooden walls. He looks at his hands, rough, scarred, and stained by the lake, and he knows they have done their work. The world outside is still moving fast, driven by the hunt for more. But in this small corner of the world, time has slowed down to a peaceful hum. True wealth was never in the ledger of the Vostok Group. It was in the patience to wait for the right moment and the wisdom to listen when others were shouting. Marek knows that the corporations will eventually move on to easier prey, but the lake will remain deep and eternal. He has protected the legacy of his fathers and secured a future for his daughter, not by changing who he was, but by standing firm in the soil of his ancestors. The soul of the land doesn't belong to the highest bidder. It belongs to the one who knows its name and respects its silence. At Beyond the Fields, we remember that the earth always knows its own. Stay grounded,